Remember when I said I'm a problem solver? Sometimes that means I brute force things. So, the rain thought that it would rain out my break dancing progress, and it's fucking wrong about that because I'm gonna dance in the fucking rain and continue. So this week I had more rest time than usual because my body was feeling it. So part of progress is rest as well. In fact, some of the premier athletes and coaches that I follow, including one Mr. Faraz Zahabi, George St. Pierre's coach, has said that consistently pushing yourself past your limits could be counterproductive. He has suggested instead that maybe you try pushing to, let's say, anywhere from 50 to 75% of your capacity consistently, and I've been doing that on and off while balancing my muse. So sometimes you just feel like really going hard. When I mentioned last time that sometimes I dance up to 4 hours a day, that's happened sporadically. Maybe in the last 32 days I've done that a handful of times, but that's the only time that I do that in opposed to Faraz's advice, because I'm really feeling it. Otherwise, I ain't someone who thinks that you have to consistently do things for the gains. I'm a lot about feeling things when it comes to art and exercise. So this is what I've been doing. That means, given that I've rested a little more this week, I'm off track on my goal. I had hoped that once moving to a weekly schedule that I'd maybe have my own choreography prepared each week for a song, but I think that's going to be harder than I realized. I think I have to admit to myself that I am a freestyle dancer more than anything else, and choreography is something that I'll just let flow when it feels like flowing. So last week I did my first breaking choreography during my 14 days in self-isolation. I created my first lap dance, chair dance choreography, and since then the inspiration has come and gone with nothing that I can turn into a concrete dance. So I'll just allow it to be it. That's the thing. When being creative, you have to balance your creativity with how you feel at the time. You might want to call it writer's block / dancer's block, but I just call it feeling the inspiration. And I'm very much about feeling things when I dance, so that's what happens. This morning I decided instead to just absorb other people's artistic creativity, so I watched something called Break the Game from Red Bull, which is a bunch of B-boys and B-girls essentially challenging each other to copy each other's power moves. That's been a lot of fun, but as I said before, power moves will have to come later, especially in the rain. I have a rough roadmap of how I will start to power move, but that is going to come much, much later. I'm still working on top rocking, and that's it, really. As of last week, I've essentially refined the original choreography. So I'm going to do the same choreography again because I think I've improved my technique quite a lot since Wednesday of last week. And I want to record the gains. But I will do it to a different song, different music, because that's what I'm feeling. So because, again, I'm a one-woman show, I'll have to sometimes leave to play music and or do other things. So it is what it is. Jake, please pick up your phone. I'm on the request line. Since I've been watching it, I might as well play it in the background. Now, I have to keep the electronics inside more than outside because it is raining. Hyper. Almost slipped there. wish I could say that my breaking moves are good enough to keep going. Maybe I'll just practice. to the beat though, that's the problem. Okay, well, let's try this. Here's how yoga can integrate into power moves. Let's just go for it. Side planks. I've been able to do for a long time, side planks. Now how am I going to integrate that into b-boying? It's a good question. I know I've seen some tutorials where that's a starting move, so I've got some basics now, but maybe I'm just going to practice it.
Welcome to Break the Game. The rules are simple. It's a battle where two breakers have to challenge each other with their most difficult moves. One breaker goes out, and the other one has to copy the exact same move. For every failure, they get one letter
This is
in the
explaining
word break.
breaking the
Whoever
game.
spells out the full word loses the battle. Let's have some fun.
Here's the thing. I want to keep dancing, but the rain is legit slippery, and I'm wondering what I can reasonably do to actually ensure that I can dance but still be safe. This is a lot of pondering here. Okay, maybe I'll work more on integrating power moves, because just now I wanted to do my Indian step variations, but those require a speed that begets a slipperiness. So actually isos work much better. So maybe I'll just do isolated pose moves, which are essentially yoga moves, but hey, it is what it is today. talk a little more then. Stop the music. Damn. That's an indication of what day-to-day can be like when you have an adventure or an adventurous mindset. I'm essentially telling myself that regardless of what happens in my life, be it pandemic, tragedy, other things, I'm here already, so I'm make the best of it. But something that I have been talking about excessively is anti-natalism, and maybe I've been talking about it assuming that people know what it is, but I should actually define it every time I say the word, because many people have no fucking idea what I'm talking about. Anti-natalism is a philosophy that asserts it's always wrong to procreate. Yeah. So, to contrast it from eugenics, I'm not saying that it's wrong for poor people to procreate, or it's wrong for Asian people to procreate, or whatever other qualifier that you could add in front of whatever people, whatever adjective you could add. I think it's wrong all the time, every time, across time and space. Every single time. Alright? So, it is what it is. The reason why I think so is because if there's anything that I think is as close to objectively true, it is that this life is suffering. And I think you have to be, in my opinion, a pretty shitty person to impose and condemn this type of life onto another human being. Now that's really hard for people to understand and digest. Someone else has made the logical claim, which I believe to be true, that actually parents are murderers because they condemn their children to a life where death is 100% the outcome. So you essentially do an action that's going to result in someone else's death 100%. That is, in my opinion, in the neighborhood of a murder. So knowing that about me, that probably explains why I have difficulty maintaining friendships with parents. As in, I find nothing they do of interest to me. Now, here's the thing. I am also a proponent of freedom and choice. So, to each their own, if they want to procreate. I just think it's always, always bad and wrong. And my parents know this themselves. We've had in-depth discussions about how I feel, and something that has helped me set free is the fact that both of my parents have admitted that they probably should not have had children. Nobody takes offense to this. I don't, they don't. They don't take offense when I say I wish I had not been born. And I don't take offense when they say they wish that they did not have me. In anything, I think, given my philosophical outlook, I'm happy that people can admit retroactively, like any decision you make. Being a parent could have been the wrong decision for many, many people. Just because it's taboo to say so doesn't make it any less true. And that's why I have prided myself on this YouTube channel and in real life that I will say what I think, how I think it, regardless of the consequences, whether people think it's taboo or not taboo, I don't give a shit. because I think that's what sets you free. And now people can have their own opinions in their own lives, how they think and feel, and they are free to do that. But this is me, this is my mode of being, and I think me being out and out has been helpful to many people, at least they've told me so. In the anti-natalist community, one of the things that they struggle with is having people be out and out. I've mentioned Professor David Benatar before, Benatar. Another professor that I've just come across yesterday is Professor Rivka Weinberg. She is at least on the anti-natalism scale, where she has written an entire book on questioning the ethics of procreation. She is not out and out anti-natalist, as in she does think that there are circumstances where it's morally permissible to have children, but she is on the scale where at least you question it. And when I say question it, I mean really question it. Because if we value other people as separate entities that have their own rights to make their own freedom and choices, then why wouldn't a potential person be the same thing? So for example, I'm espousing my views, but I'm just talking, explaining. I'm not out there activist marching to take away people's rights. I think, to be honest, I'm a combination of a libertarian liberal. So I think in the smallest government possible to have society function, but that government happens to have to be a large one. That's it. Okay? So I think that everyone should just be allowed to do whatever they want to do, including taking drugs, soliciting prostitutes, whatever it may be. Those are, again, contracts and deals between individuals who are consenting and of the ability to consent. That's why I also bring in, for example, employment contracts between restaurants and waiters and waitresses. These are all people who are willing and able to consent to contracts between them. So when they do that, they do their own thing. That's why I don't interfere with tips and all this stuff. Like, my money's my money. I ain't gonna go and enforce what's happening between a prostitute and a John. It's not my job, not my problem, and I'm not going to go take on responsibilities that aren't mine. But I think the role of government is to have an infrastructure in place so that, for example, prostitutes or waitresses or whomever has the legal protection where there might be undue power or influence. And yes, that's one thing that I probably should clarify. In a free market society, companies and restaurants and others might have what you would call an abnormally large or unfair negotiating advantage just by their position. So that's where government steps in. And in Canada, we have minimum wage. So it is what it is. Even in the US, I've explained, as I understand it, federal minimum wage has to be topped up if a waitress or waiter makes less than minimum wage. So why would you bail out a restaurant? They'll be paid. And if they're not, that's a problem with the restaurant not following the legal rules. It ain't your problem as a customer. And that's why I say, the reason why I use tipping as a tip of the iceberg is because once you start challenging everything that you've been told, you'll eventually arrive at, from tipping, at least my journey, all the way to procreation. To be fair, my journey was actually the opposite, from procreation up. Since I've been young, I've always questioned what is the point of this exercise, especially if you bring someone else into it. So I would say being a parent is akin to not you taking drugs yourself, you forcing another person one way to take drugs. You basically imposing them to what I call this curse of life, and you just saying, here, fuckface, you're here for however many years you're here, and the way society is organized is you don't have an organized way out. So, my compromise would be fine if people insist that they must bring kids into this world, then there has to be an escape hatch. What happens to people who legitimately come into the world and don't want to be here? It's like you're living in a Sims game or whatever other game, you just don't like playing the game. And everyone around you, you must play the game because we say so, because we think this, we think that. No. People got to rethink everything from the ground up. So for me, it actually started from questioning procreation all the way to tipping, but from other people it might be backwards, from tipping to procreation. Who knows? All I know is that, in my opinion, the way the world works, especially during this pandemic, I would seriously question people who still think it's a good idea to have children. And people say, well, bodily autonomy, well, purpose, well, this. Well, let's say you were a person who enjoyed having sex with children because that was you and that was your meaning and purpose. Does that give you the right to do it because that makes you happy? No. I think most people would say no. There are limits. So this is the extension of that. And yes, I do draw a connection between rape and parenting, because to me it's actually along the axis of a similar thing. When you don't give someone the choice and you force something on them, where's the difference? So that might not be something that people want to hear, but in my mind, I don't think there's a difference, and that explains why I've had such difficulty just staying in touch with people who are my generation parents. Obviously, our parents' generation, you can argue maybe was the last one where they just mindlessly fucked and did all that, and maybe kids were also investments and assets and whatever you want, all of the typical BS that we're told. But, I mean, in our generation, what the fuck was the point of going all the schooling, graduate school, PhD, if you can't apply things like critical thinking to your own life? There's no point. There's literally no point, in my opinion, again. Alright, so people can feel however they feel about that. I feel this way about it, and that's how I feel. So, yeah. All this controversy, blah, 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 blah. Anyways, yeah, that's how I feel. Anti-natalism, ANTINATALISM. Search it up.